Shalom. Want to give all want to give all praise, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash. Double honor to the apostles and elders at GMS to rule well. Peace and blessings to the Akilas out there fighting, doing this work with truth and sincerity. Back again with another lesson. Brother Basapar, Lord willing, this is edifying. We call this one, listen to the brother Mike Allen, LA. I'm pretty sure brothers and apostles and the elders and the men out there, man, is on it through the spirit, man. This is Genesis chapter 3 all over again. Serpent and the Eve. Serpent and Eve.
Repeat after me. I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear
I, Kamala Davy Harris, solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
that I
Don't have to play all that, man. You see what's going on. Once again, this is Serpent and the Eve. Serpent being Esau, Edom, so-called white man today, and Eve being the so-called black woman, man. So there's basically nothing new under the sun. When you read in the book of Ecclesiastes 9:1 and 9, basically there's nothing under the sun. There's nothing under the sun that is new. This goes back to Eve in the garden. So history right now, what you're witnessing, repeats itself. So Eve made a deal in the garden back in Genesis with Esau. And Esau, he has a spirit of a serpent. And the so-called black woman is Eve. And she basically teamed up with the serpent. And we know that that is not good for you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, man. Because these people, these other heathen nations and stuff like that want to basically destroy you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, man. You see? So this is Genesis 3:1. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which the Lord had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? So this is the serpent. And this serpent was very shrewd, or he was sly or treacherous. Basically a person who exploits the weaker vessel, which in this case would be Eve. So it wasn't a snake, it was a man. And back then they were called the sons of wicked. So this serpent was shrewd or sly or treacherous in the way he deals with the weak vessel. He would exploit you at any given moment. Okay? So he exploited Eve, and but again, this is not a snake. This is a man who has the attributes of a snake. You see what I'm saying? Snake is slick and cunning, man. A snake can't trick you. A snake go be a snake and bite you, and that's what it does. But this man has a slick way and a cunning and shrewd way of basically spitting game at you, so to speak. Okay? And the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. You see what I'm saying? But of the fruit of the tree, which is in the midst of the garden, the Most High said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the trees the trees represent the people in the garden back then. So when you go right here to Mark chapter 8 and 24, and he looked up and said, I see men as trees walking. So basically, back in Genesis 3:3, I think that's where I left off at, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, the Most High have said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest ye die. So you shall not, he was telling the woman, like, look, he was telling the so-called black woman, Eve, basically not to listen to the Most High. This is what the serpent was telling him, because he said in verse 3, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, the Most High said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. You shall not listen to the philosophy of the heathen nations, man. That was in the midst of the garden, man. So the serpent, so-called white man, was telling the so-called black woman Eve not to basically listen to the Most High. So he was exploiting her because he knew that she was the weaker vessel, man. You understand? And he was telling her that you'll be a God knowing good and evil, man. Verse 4, and the serpent said unto the woman, ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. You see what I'm saying? So he was telling the so-called black woman not to listen to the Most High, and just to basically listen to him, and you'll be knowing good and evil, man. But we wasn't instructed to do that. The Lord gave us commandments to follow, man. He told us not to follow the philosophies and the ways of the other nations, not to eat of that. You see, it wasn't no actual fruit. This is dealing with philosophy and the ways of the heathens, man. We wasn't supposed to walk in the way of other heathens, man. But Eve, when she did that, she made a deal with the serpent in the garden. And this is what you're seeing all over today, man. There is nothing new under the sun, man. So once again, the serpent, the so-called white man, was telling Eve, so-called black woman, not to basically listen to the Most High. So he was exploiting her because he knew that she was the weaker vessel. Verse 6, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. So she got that taste of freedom, so to speak, that feminism movement, or that power. So she got that taste of power, and her eyes was open, and she basically was convinced of listening to the heathen nation's philosophy or of their wisdom. And by her being convinced by listening to them, she thought their way was better. She thought the wisdom of the other nations were better than the Most High. But see, the Most High have order, man. He always deals with order, you see. And then she went running to Adam, and what did Adam do? He followed after Eve, man. That's not order. The Most High gave us commandments on what to do. We wasn't supposed to follow the woman. And by us doing that, that's why we catching hell today, man. You see what I'm saying? That's why everything is basically out of order, and the woman basically leads the man. My choice, my JJ, my kids, my opinion, my decision. It's all that spirit in the so-called black woman, or in all of our women of our nation. This is what this goes back to. Listening to the serpent in the garden, man. This is all history that's repeating itself with the deal that was made in the garden with Adam, with the serpent and Eve, man. There's nothing new under the sun. When she got that taste of power, or that taste of her own so-called identity, her eyes was open to this man's wisdom, and she was convinced that that wisdom was better than the Most High's, man. You see? And the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. So they basically was trying to hide themselves among the other nations. So they was like, you know what? We just go blend in and just basically do what the other nations do, man. That's what that's talking about. Because when you go to Ezekiel 31:8, the cedars in the garden, he's talking about during the time of Genesis. The cedars in the garden of the Most High could not hide him. The fir trees were not like his bows. The bows represent our sons. Our sons and the heathen sons will go be different from one another. So the cedars in the garden of the Most High could not hide him. So Adam and Eve could not hide themselves amongst the nation, because our spirit is going to stand out. Our sons were not going to be like their sons. Just like today, you go blend yourself in another country among other nations. When some music come on and you catch that rhythm, you go dance way different than the nation that you're trying to hide yourself upon. Just like you calling yourself Americans today. You're hiding upon something that's not your identity, but yet and still, we still stand out. So no matter where you try to go or who you try to hide up under, it doesn't matter, man, because our spirit was different from the other nation's spirit, man. And that's why it says here in Genesis 3:7, and the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked. They knew that they sinned. They knew that they went off. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. Okay, verse 8. And they heard the voice of the Lord power walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Now, let's go to Luke. Let's go to the book of Luke 1 and 70. Let's read this. Luke 1 and 70. As he spake by the mouth of his holy prophets, which have been since the world began. So in Genesis 3 and 8, when the voice of the Lord was walking in the cool of the day, meaning there was the prophets out there at that time. That's how they heard the Lord's voice in the cool of the day, because you heard the prophets out there. I just read to you in Luke 1 and 70 that he spake through his prophets since the beginning of time. You see? So that's how they heard the voice of the Lord back in Genesis 3, walking in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord power among the trees of the garden. I just read to you in Mark 8 and 24 that the trees represent the people. So they tried to hide themselves amongst the heathen nations, so the Most High wouldn't see them, because he sent out his prophets. That's how they heard the voice, okay, of the Most High. And they basically knew that they sinned. And that's what it says, verse 10. Well, yeah, I'm going to verse 9. And the Lord power called unto Adam, and he said unto him, where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden. I mean, he heard the prophets. Okay, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself, because he knew that he had sinned, man, like the brother was saying. And today, when you see Jake don't want to come up to the camps or don't want to hear you when you get to bringing out that Bible, whether you at your job or wherever you on highways and byways, you get to talking about the scriptures against Jake. Jake like to scurry and flee off. That's why the scriptures say the wicked shall flee when no man pursue. Because they know deep down inside that they are ashamed, and the Bible going to expose or expose their sins, man. That's in the book of John 3 and 20. That's why Jake don't really want to come and listen, because they gonna be ashamed of the sins that they have committed. And this is what's going on, man. So when Adam, when he was like, he didn't want to come to the Lord, or he didn't want to come to the prophets, he was ashamed because he sinned. Because John 3 and 20 says, well, for everyone that doth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deed should be reproved. Because you know then that you go be ashamed for the wickedness that you have done in the eyes of the Lord, man. You see what I'm saying? So that's why he said, verse 10, and I said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, because he knew that he sinned after he listened to Eve, after she would listen to the serpent in the garden, which is Esau, Edom, the so-called white man. And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself. So the sins that he committed, he was ashamed of it, man. So he tried to hide himself. Adam and Eve tried to hide themselves amongst the other nations, man. And you can't do that, because our spirit is different from all spirits on the planet. The Israelite spirits are totally different from the heathen nations, man. You see, verse 11, and he said, who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat? So who basically, so who you been listening to? I told you not to listen to these. I told you not to go to the tree in the garden, but you ate of the fruit. Meaning you took on their philosophy, you start to be convinced in their ways. So now he says, so you've been listening to the other nations, basically, after I told you not to be dealing with them? I told you not to be dealing with these other nations. And as you see right here, Eve, sworn in, right now, is doing the same thing that happened in the garden, man. The same thing, man. And Eve is being deceived again by that same serpent, man. That's why the scripture, it's in the Apocrypha, Ecclesiasticus 25 and 25. 125 and 25. Where was that? 24. Ecclesiasticus 25 and 24. Of the woman came the beginning of sin, and through her we all die. Because the agenda that's on the elite banking family's mind is to exterminate you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. And they're going to use someone of our nation, like who you see, that's going to sucker you in to their agenda. And this is the same play in the garden. She been sold out back then or been deceived. She's going to deceive her people into taking whatever man, that's Satan. She's going to trick our people into believing and taking whatever they throw at them through her. Because that's Eve in the garden, listen to the serpent all over again. She has been deceived, man. And through her came the beginning of sin. So this is all Eve of our nation, man. And now our eyes are open and we are not eating that fruit, aka taking the jab, taking no RFID, whatever. We gonna have to solely, truly depend upon Yahweh Bashem Abshah, like he told us in the garden, man. Do as I say and I will take care of you, man. And this is what you see right here before you, man. You see? This is the same thing over and over again. Like it says in Ecclesiastes 1:9, there's nothing new under the sun, man. Nothing new under the sun. And this goes back to Eve in the garden. So the history is repeating itself as you see before you today with Eve making that deal in the garden, man. Back during the time of Genesis with Esau. And he's being that serpent. You see? And she basically teamed up with the serpent in the garden. And that's not good for us today. And you've seen it happening again today. You see? And you're seeing that right now. And this serpent was a shrewd, sly, and treacherous person who basically exploits you when he see weakness. When he sees weakness in you, he exploits you. This is a so-called white man. This is Edom Esau, man. It wasn't no snake. It was a man, and he was known as the sons of the wicked back during the times, man. You see? And the trees represents the people. The fruit, don't listen to the other philosophies of the other nations. But our people like to listen to the other philosophies of the other nation because it makes them feel good. But you have a whole book with laws, statutes, and commandments that'll make you better and put you above all heathen nations on the planet. And still, you get that taste of ownership. You get that you get that sense of your identity, which your identity is a Hebrew Israelite from your respectable tribe. But once you get that taste of power, your eyes was open and you liked that. And you was convinced that this wisdom or the wisdom of the heathen nations were better than the wisdom of Yahweh Bashem Abshah, man. Once again, this is, I guess I'm just saying, I don't know what to call this, serpent and Eve, whatever, history repeats itself in the garden. With that, with the brother Bonsa Paul, Lord willing, till the next time, I should say, Shalom.